All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the LCI Green Room for week 4 of the Provoked Book Club. Here with my brothers Sean Collins and Mark Poles of the Buds in Reality and Knocked Conscious podcast, respectively. How are you guys doing tonight?
Great, man.
Awesome.
Great. I want to start this show off by saying happy holidays, everybody.
Happy holidays. Happy New Year.
Very important day in our history, apparently. And I like to celebrate it as a holiday because, well, it is a holiday.
This is a great day.
Imagine if
for
the weather was
walking.
like the same 4 years ago. How like no one would have showed up.
This is a great
think
day
about
for walking into government buildings when they open the doors for you. That's all I'm going to say.
And stealing lecterns and all that stuff. And
Go
maybe,
inside. Go
Yeah.
inside.
Listen,
Peacefully.
listen, I love when they say like they violated the sacredness of our democracy, and I go, don't make the January 6th protesters sound cooler than they are.
I mean, anybody who knows better in the know knows that democracy is gang rape anyways. Democracy is garbage. It's mob rule. Like, this is not what any individual signs up for. We are individuals, and this is a republic. We are not a democracy, and we need to get this idea out of our head that it is a democracy.
But we use the government.
I mean, we don't have to use them ideally as an anarchist, and you know this. Like,
I
bleh. Happy
Well,
holiday.
we actually, I got to get you guys on for just I guess our sort of like introduction, like announcement episode. We got a little into theory, but we'll have to, when this is done, just do a normal conversation on theory, religion, stuff like that. That'll be a lot of fun. I was actually on my episode that's coming out this Wednesday of like my solo podcast. I was talking about this series and how much I've enjoyed it, because we all come from different backgrounds and experiences. It reminds me, I used to do a show with Reed Coverdale called Capitalist Communion. It was like 2 Christians and 2 atheists, and we just talked about religion, current events, philosophy, and stuff like that. And it was a lot of fun. And talking with you guys, even though like we're talking about the stuff in this book, we connect it to other things, and it's been a lot of fun. It reminds me of that experience. So, well, I guess yeah, everyone watching, go ahead and comment, and Amity, if you're there, we started within 5 minutes of the scheduled start time today, so you can't complain. We're cleaning our act up.
You're on the top.
Yep. All right. Well, I guess I'm gonna kick off this shindig.
We got a thing coming up on Thursday, just so you know. Sean and Zach and Jason of Drop the Mask, all these guys, we're going to do a panel show. We'll have to have you on then. We'll do one with you, and then we'll start, because we're starting to collaborate and start really getting some panel stuff together. So this has been so much fun, and this has actually gotten me to reach out to do more collaboration group type stuff. So thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah. No, I love doing that kind of stuff. So yeah, for sure. Let me know. I'll be glad to do it. My schedule will be a lot freer come 5 weeks from now. This thing has completely eaten up my life, to the point where actually it's cool though, because like everyone sees me with this book, my friends, my family, my kids, and like, what's it about? And it's like, how long do I have to tell you what this book's about? Because I can just let you read the title, or you can sit here and listen to me rant for 30 minutes. But
we'll read the first 10 pages and then just repeat.
Pretty much. You can do
it where we're at.
Pretty much. All right. Although, if I was going to give someone a Scott Horton book to start with, it would not be this one. It would be Enough Already, which you can almost see just a little bit off camera there today.
Oh, nice.
But that's like, if you're going to start somewhere, that's the best one to start with, in my opinion.
Fool's Errand is good too. I gave my buddy Enough Already, though, who happens to be a retired Ranger. He did 20 years in the Army, and 18 of them was under being a Ranger. So anybody who knows the military understands what those guys got to do. I almost feel bad that I let him borrow that book because he wanted to burn his gear. He wanted to burn all his stuff, and I'm like, no, don't do that, dude. Like, you didn't know better, and stuff like that. But whatever. I don't mean that in a badder way or anything like that. I just know that I felt bad that I introduced him to that, and then he was like, "I'm burning all my uniforms and all my Purple Hearts and medals and blah blah blah." And I was like, "Oh my god, maybe this wasn't the best idea."
It's a hard break
Yeah,
though, man, because I was in the same boat. Like I said, I just failed the physical on the last doctor in the military. So I would either been there or not made it, right? So a lot of us come from that side. It breaks your heart when you hear some of the stuff that happens and that you're connected to it, it's hard. It's tough.
That's right.
yeah, for
That's
sure.
right.
Well, I'm kicking off this shindig. I got section 1. We always split it into 3 sections, and we each one of us takes a lead. So I started off. I'm doing the Maidan Revolution all the way up to the I'm actually very jealous of Sean today because he has the section I would have chosen if we weren't just kind of randomly like doing cycling through a certain order. But you're going to be starting with Yes Nazis, which is the section I was looking forward to the most in this book. So that'll be fun. But I'm going to set you up the best I can, starting with the Maidan Revolution. And by the way, just for those of you, because I know we're casting to multiple places, in case you haven't heard already, I'm Jacob Winograd, host of the Biblical Anarchy podcast here at the Libertarian Christian Institute. We're the ones that are helping to put all this together with the help of Sean and Mark, and you guys can find more about us at libertarianchristians.com. So that's right there at the bottom ticker. All right, let's get into the Maidan Revolution. So obviously, there was already tensions because of the many times after all the promises of the early years of no NATO expansion. We've already covered the last few weeks a lot of NATO expansion, a lot of U.S. and Europe sort of like sabotaging of Russia across multiple different fronts, economically, militarily, all sorts of not very good faith actions from the American and Western European nations. And then to kind of set the stage for the Maidan Revolution, I guess like the first thing I wanted to bring up was that the EU and I think also the IMF were demanding austerity measures and economic reforms for Ukraine, and this did not. In terms of like, hey, we're going to have a trade deal with you, but it's going to come with all this, red tape, all this stipulation and whatnot, but what we're going to have to make you do. And at the same time, forgive me, there's like a million names here. Yanukovych, right, is the one who's in charge at this point. Am I remembering that correctly?
Yes, you got it.
Yes. Okay.
Yep, Yanukovych, right?
Yes,
Yep.
Yanukovych. I always get, for some reason, I get Yanukovych mixed up in my head with the Yushchenko because they both start with a Y, and they were around the same
I get
time.
them mixed up with Nina Jankowicz for some reason, which doesn't really help at all.
There's too many like Russian Eastern European names in here, and even though Winograd's technically a Eastern European last name, but whatever. All right, so yeah, there's pressure because it's like he could sign a deal with Russia, but then he's going to be accused of being a pawn of Putin. But if he takes the EU deal, it's going to kind of screw them over with all the really, I think it was like they were going to freeze government salaries and pensions and stuff for a certain amount of time, extremely limit how much money that they were going to be able to borrow. Whereas in the meantime, Russia is offering them like $15 billion in loans and energy discounts and stuff like that. So I think the way Scott puts it when he talks about this in an interview was that the EU overplayed their hand because Yanukovych wanted to go more west, but basically they kind of, the incentives were sort of structured by the West and the East in this case, that he said, well, I guess I'm going to go East, which I found to be just a little bit hypocritical because it's like, I guess America and Europe are allowed to impose austerity and restrictions on Ukraine, but never upon themselves, right?
I mean, that it seems to be the theme at this point throughout the book.
Yeah, what is rules for thee but not for me, I guess,
That's the United
as the
States
saying
MO.
goes. Yeah. Mark, you have any thoughts on any of that?
I have thoughts and I'm muted, but yeah, all this is just absolutely crazy. Can we just let's just continue? Let's just continue because we got so much stuff. I just want to
I
chat
know.
about stuff after this. Like, this is awesome, by the way. I'm so happy that we're here. Like, I just want to bathe and just enjoying this. So yeah, this is just absolutely crazy, this stuff that's going on. It boggles the mind.
Well, so then you have Victoria Nuland, a name everyone should be familiar with, Secretary of State, openly supporting protesters during this
Hand out those
time.
cookies. Hand out
Yep,
those cookies. Woo!
distributing aid, making recommendations. We, of course, have the very infamous intercepted call between it was Nuland and I forget who she was talking to. It's somewhere here in my notes. Um, so that's from intercepted Nuland and Ambassador Payat. Um, but yeah, basically, which I think this is the one where you get F the EU as a as a very infamous quote out of that. But yeah, it's just basically like this is what we're going to do with Ukraine, and we're going to make sure these people end up in charge, and here's how we're going to sell it, and here's how we're going to make it happen, and basically bad mouthing anyone who wants to get in the way of that. At this point, you kind of get. I mean, I think throughout the entirety of the book so far, you've really seen these people have a lot of hubris, but like at this point the hubris, the being drunk on our own hegemony, it's really, I mean, just I think at its peak right now in terms of just like we're America, we can do whatever we want, and again, it's not even like at this point there's not even the pretense of well, should we be concerned about Russia and their interests, right? Like it's just basically what like a well, this is just what's going to happen, and Russia's just going to have to play ball. So, uh,
I mean, that's
and
been the theme. That's been the theme this whole book. It's like, dangle the carrot in front of them, get them to conform to whatever they want them to conform to, but then move the goalposts. That's been the name of the game this whole book since the beginning.
Okay, we need a new Peanuts. We need a new Peanuts cartoon. It's the great former Eastern blocks, Charlie Brown, where Lucy just keeps pulling that football away. She's like, "Oh, Estonia, boom, Latvia, boom, Belarus, boom." Just keep like, pulling the football away. But that's what we should do. That's what we should
yep.
call it.
Well, then there's the big debate, of course, about like, well, was this a this is part of what Scott was in a debate on Piers Morgan's show like a month ago, and this is where there's this like great quote from Scott where he's just like, "That's not what I said. Why don't you argue against something I actually said, you dumb bastard?" was amazing. But it was this guy he was debating, which I forget his name, but it was about they were talking about the Maidan Revolution, and he was like, "Well, according to this guy, I guess democratic revolutions aren't possible." And it's like, well, hold on. I think the whole point of what Scott gets into in this section is that, okay, yeah, for sure, there is some grassroots movement, some legitimate actors on the ground. But it's like, would they have been this well organized, this well funded? Would they have been this well equipped, trained, or effective without all of the American and Western interference, which is it takes on the same, at this point they have a pretty good playbook, right? They put on rock concerts and show up and help organize the protests, occupy certain buildings and whatnot. And so, yeah, so it's at this point, it's a corrupt machine, but it's a well-oiled machine. And, at this point they're just thinking like, okay, now we're just gonna, do it again and do it in Ukraine. And well, I want to get into the violent push.
If I may,
Yes,
Jacob, if I may interject on that very quickly.
Yeah, I was gonna say, is there
Speaking of
anyone want to?
music,
Yeah,
yeah, it's just interesting with like Mike. If you watch Mike Benz, I never really thought about the connection of music concerts and these uprisings, right? What was happening? What happened on October 6th? Wasn't there an extended music concert somewhere that was going on that got invaded and kind of happened and started like a whole other war? Like that's an interesting point too, but it's like funny how these music how they get us, and until you actually read it on paper, until someone says this is how they get you, go, oh yeah, that is how they got me. Like you just have to actually think about it, and that's where the cognitive dissonance happens. I'm at the point where telling people this is what's happening, like that doesn't happen, no way, and then you're like, no man, just take a step back, take a step back. They're playing with your mind, they're using music, they're using your vibes, they're using your feels to get you to feel what you want.
You know, you bring up concerts and such. There was a huge concert in Moscow in 1991, actually, where some major bands like Metallica had performed. And this is in the height of, you know, all the things that are going on out there, you know, especially in the early 90s. 91, and Metallica performed in front of 1.5 million people in Moscow. Probably the biggest concert ever in the history of concerts. And their story that they tell about that, I'm a big music nerd, so I'm glad I get to incorporate this. But they said it was so bizarre that it was, you know, like it was cool to play the concert in front of all those people, but none of those people had ever been a part of anything like that or seen anything like that. And then to boot, the Soviet police went through there and just started beating the shit out of concert goers during the show because they were getting like they were starting to mosh and stuff, and it was a little too rowdy and whatnot. And so, you know, that's one of those things where like they weren't quite ready for something like that to happen. They didn't know how to deal with it. But Metallica's story behind that is like, wow, dude, because they said like people were so happy and so scared at the same time, pretty much.
Yep. The last thing I'll read this little section from the book here, which was uh, one of Scott's citations from someone named Clarenberg, journalist Kit Clarenberg, who was writing about the degree in which that the U.S. and directly and indirectly through stuff like the NED and all these other 4-letter agencies we've talked about before, like National Endowment for Democracy and whatnot. So he wrote in the hours following Russia's invasion of Ukraine. So he's talking about obviously fast forwarding. The NED hurried to remove any and all trace of its funding for organizations in Ukraine from its website. He noted that while the NED grants database for Ukraine returned no results, a snapshot of the page captured February 25th from 2022 reveals that since 2014, a total of 334 projects in the country have been awarded a staggering $22.4 million, adding that by NED President Dwayne Wilson's reckoning, Kiev is the organization's 4th largest funding recipient worldwide. Journalist Will Porter found scrubbed NED records showing that they had spent $4.5 million on 70 separate projects in 2013 to 2014 alone. So that's just a staggering amount of money just from the NED. And again, I want to address a comment in the from someone on X who I've interacted with this guy before, Mr. J, who's making just a bad faith argument. He says, I know people who personally attended Maidan and they are still waiting for their paycheck. Again, that's not what anyone, actually the opposite of what I said. I said what Scott said, which everyone agrees, that yes, there were legitimate protesters there. But there is a legitimate grassroots movement, and then there is how much that grassroots movement will grow and how effective it can be, how organized it can be, when it is, $22.4 million between since 2014, over 334 projects in total. So that's a lot of money to invest. That's just one example from one journalist in this book, right? Then we have to talk about all the what all the other. There was up here a U.S. aid grant of $50,000 to Hermadsky TV. Again, so there's all this money being poured in, all this, Victoria Nuland visiting. The point is that this wasn't like this huge successful grassroots movement, cropped up, and then like, maybe America from the side going like, "Hey, we support you," and like it wasn't a democratic revolution that was completely organic, right? Like when you have outside countries and forces meddling in with millions of dollars through direct and indirect interventions, that is, it's worth pointing that out. And okay, why are they doing that, right? And it's also important to note here that what they're doing here is essentially that they're not supporting the democratic outcome. Is sort of the important takeaway here. Like in this case, they didn't like the outcome of the election.
They created polls to counter what the vote was, or what they said the vote was. There are clear times when they step in and they go, these polls show a complete opposite. So you can't believe the voting. You have to actually believe the polls. It's like,
also,
what?
Mr. J,
let me have this one. Let me have this one.
Go ahead. Have at it.
Mr. J. U.S. geopolitical interests are the root of all evil when it comes to everything that you've seen post World War II. Period. The fact that you can sit there and say that Russia doesn't have a legitimate beef when it's been over and over and tried again, that the United States interference is the reason they went into Ukraine in the first place. My dog, I do not know what to tell you. There's receipts everywhere. The United States provoked Russia into attacking Ukraine because they overthrew their government in 2014, which was the final straw. Ukraine was always a hard stop. We're going to keep saying it every single week, or at least I will, that Ukraine was the hard stop. And when the United States government decided to overthrow their government via CIA and implement their own people, as they do all over the place, see Central and South America, there's receipts there too. Knock yourselves out. I don't have all day to go through this. But you can't just sit there and be like, whoa, Russia is just this big bad entity that just attacked this country for no reason. We went in there, we took their government, we started putting up biolabs. They were warned. They've been warned for decades to not play with Ukraine. And then they did it. They didn't only do it once, they did it twice. Never forget about the Orange Revolution, right? I believe it's Orange Revolution.
Yeah, Orange Revolution, yep.
Yeah.
2008 and 2014, right? Is what we're talking about
here.
So
please.
Let me just read this for those who would listen on the audio version only later. He said, wow, U.S. has geopolitical interests. Russia should invade and butcher innocent civilians and perpetrate unspeakable war crimes. That's not what anyone here said. No one here said, and therefore Russia, the book's not called Justified. The book's called Provoked. They were provoked. That doesn't mean that there's not blood on
I have a clip for that
Putin's
later,
hands.
guys, just so you know. Yeah, keep
sitting
on that. I have a clip from Horton and from Kathy Young about that. So I made sure to I clipped that stuff today.
But here's the thing.
We live biolabs? Biolabs? They've been putting biolabs in there since they overthrew the government. This isn't a hard search. This isn't a hard thing to look up. You can knock yourself out on Google or FreeSpoke or whatever the hell else you're using out there. But this is an absolute ridiculous argument that this is just happening for no reason. I'm sorry, Mr. J, you're wrong.
Well,
there is a congressional video. There's a congressional video about the biolabs in Ukraine. Was it Nuland that was talking about them? We'll pull it up. I'm happy to pull it, but there is an actual video of her talking about the biolabs in Ukraine and the danger that they pose and that they can't get in their hands. I think it was on a congressional hearing.
Well,
so I'll happily pull that.
If I had more time, which I don't want to monopolize the time here, but the sniper controversy is another important part of this narrative, because that's another form of messing with sort of the natural perceptions of people, right? It's manipulation of people's opinions when you have snipers firing on crowds of protesters and police, killing both, exacerbating chaos. And Scott goes through, like, again, I'd have to read all of it. It's pages of stuff in this section, but Scott kind of makes a really convincing case that, like, hey, there's a lot of evidence here that shows that, like, between the size of the bullet holes and just the way that both of them were being killed, it's like these snipers were not, like, they were clearly just trying to escalate the chaos and the tension so that it would sort of like, like Yanukovych would not be able to stay in power was sort of the ultimate end goal there. And I'll then hand the reins off to Sean because, I mean, really my section ended with, like the violent putsch, which is about the roles in which, the role of neo-Nazis and the, far-right extremists in Ukraine and the role they played in the Maidan Revolution. And I know that Mr. J and many others will go, what? No, there's not real Nazis in Ukraine. That's crazy. That's just Kremlin, Putin talking points, right, Sean?
Look up Azov Battalion. Please do that. And then this is a perfect time for me to come in because this is something I actually learned. This is a history lesson we're about to go on at this point. And I started with, hang on a second here. Oh, declaring a state. That was my section where we started, where President Bandera, who was the Ukrainian president at the time, attempted to declare Ukraine as a new state in June of 1941, said the country would work closely with the Hitler regime, making a new order in Europe. Even sent letters to Hitler, Mussolini, etc., declaring that he was loyal to the new order of the fascist Europe. They even hung banners in Lviv saying, "Long live Bandera and Adolf Hitler." So please, you were born in Soviet Ukraine. Cool. I'm glad you were. So you should know this stuff like the back of your hand then. I'm glad you were, Mr. J. And, the funniest part about that is Hitler didn't want to ally with Ukraine. He actually wanted to conquer it. He wanted nothing to do with an alliance through Ukraine. President Bandera, dude, he was the president. I don't know what to tell you, man. Read a book. But anyhow, he didn't want to do that. He actually wanted to conquer it. Nazis demanded that the OUN withdraw its declaration, and Bandera surrendered to the honorary detention. But the OUN leaders still working with the Germans while on house arrest until August 1942, where Bandera was moved to Sachsenhausen, if I said that correct, probably not. Where Bandera was moved to Sachsenhausen concentration camp for better conditions. Wow, the dude was moved to a concentration camp for better conditions. The Bandera's partner, Mykola Lebed, escaped to lead the OUNB at war. The war was to purposely kill civilians, particularly Poles, Muscovite, and Jews. Now, from there, I'm going to read a little bit from the book, just because Mr. Justin Trudeau stepped down from Canada today as their prime minister. And the Galatian SS became the small controversy when in 2023, Ukrainian President Zelensky, Canada's Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, and the Canadian Parliament honored an old war veteran named Yaroslav Hunka, who the speaker read out, had fought against the Russians in World War II. They had seemingly forgot that Canada proudly fought as allies of the Soviet Union against Nazi Germany in that war at the cost of 45,000 of their own lives, and did not realize that Hunka, a veteran of the 1st Ukrainian Division, aka the 14th Waffen Grenadier Division of the SS, was likely a war criminal whose unit had participated in the Holocaust while serving Heinrich Himmler and his Führer. In 2011, Hunka described 1941 to 1943 as the happiest years of my life. The Poles immediately moved to have him extradited to be prosecuted for war crimes. Ukrainian SS veterans who were so prosperous in Canada, they donated hundreds of thousands of dollars to various universities in the country, including Voldemort and Daria. Oh my God. Kubijiu, I'm not even going to try that. Memorial Endowment Fund at Alberta University. Rudling said Kabubo was a chief collaborator with the Nazis, making Hunka look more insignificant in comparison. It was shown in 2017 that Krista Freeland, the former Financial Times reporter, Deputy Prime Minister of Canada, and anti-Russian hawk, had spent a lifetime citing political influence of their maternal grandfather, Michael Chomiak. It turned out that he was Ukrainian Nazi propagandist during the war who wrote that the Banderist weekly Krivitsky Visti publication that blamed the Jews for Soviet communism and called people to join German Nazis to fight the Jewish Bolshevik threat. She then lied and claimed that this was Russian disinformation. It was not, and she knew it, having helped her uncle write an article about it years before. It was also later revealed that Freeland herself got her start writing for the Ukrainian Weekly, a nationalist paper which glorified Bandera as a Galatian SS. Perhaps this should not be surprising, since Canada accepted thousands of Ukrainian veterans of Hitler's SS after World War II, and to this day maintains monuments of their legacy. Nothing to see here. Everything's fine. From there on, the OUN helped kill hundreds of thousands of Poles and Jews. They rounded up Ukrainian Jews to be slaughtered and or made slaves. And then, oh my God, my chicken scratch is atrocious. I apologize, you guys. The UPA, which is the Ukrainska Povstanch Armenia. Oh my God. I apologize for my handwriting, you guys. It's atrocious. Continued to kill Jews from 1942 to 1943. Nazis released Bandera from camp in 1944. He went back to work for Germans. Bandera escaped and went back to Austria and then to West Germany. From there, oh my God, Mykola Lenin, after the Germans' defeat, the OUN kept fighting an insurgency against the Soviets with the help of the CIA. The CIA continued to play devil's advocate for decades. And then I'm going to read from the book from here on out, because my notes suck and I can't read them because my writing sucks. We're going to start here. When Viktor Yanukovych was elected in 2010, he had the courts declare the designation of the Bandera and Shukevich as national heroes to be illegal and replaced it. He fired social nationalists from the SBU archives and Institute of National Memory, put a communist in charge of it, and then closed it down. The nationalists were down but not out, according to the journalist Palash Ghosh. European and Israeli leaders expressed shock in October of 2012 when Svoboda gained that 10% of the electorate in parliamentary elections, entering the legislature for the first time in western regions of Ukraine. Svoboda gained as much as 40% of the vote. I'm really sorry I sabotaged these names. I'm an American who doesn't know them. Then you go to the revenge of the right. But after the coup of 2014, President Petro Poroshenko decreed October 14th, the anniversary of the founding of the UPA, to be Defender of Ukraine Day. Journalist Max Bluntfamel wrote that when European Parliament condemned Yushchenko's proclamation as affront to the European values, the UCCA-affiliated Ukraine World Congress reacted with outrage, accusing the EU of another attempt to rewrite Ukrainian history during World War II. On this website, the UCCA dismissed historical accounts of Bandera's collaboration with the Germans and Soviet propaganda. And then to move on from there, oh my gosh, yes, we got to go all the way here. I'm sorry. We're going to end it here. And there's a lot in between there where Dude, you can't even read the names and portray as an expert. Dude, fuck you, man. I don't care. You can literally talk all this shit you want, and I literally don't care. And that's that. Sorry,
Well,
libertarian.
hold on. It's not an argument to say you can't pronounce a name. And first of all, none of us are portraying ourselves as experts. We are discussing a book written by Scott Horton, who not only is an expert but has 6,000 footnotes in this book. Right? 6,000. It's a lot,
Of
right?
this 660 pages, 90 of it is footnotes.
Yeah. And so
that there you go, right there.
Right. So it's like, do you want to provide an argument, or do you just want to be like, oh, bro can't pronounce the name? Like, that's
My
not an
favorite
argument.
character
That is so
assassinations.
weak. That's
Mr.
right.
J,
Like
is your name blah, 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 too? I'm sure it is. I'm sure it is. So, anyways,
Martian. The book is Provoked by Scott Horton. Provoked: How Washington started the new Cold War with Russia and the catastrophe in Ukraine. You can follow Scott on X. I see you're watching from X. If you don't follow Scott, go look up at Scott Horton Show. And Mr. J, yeah, your arguments were above, and we debunked them. So I don't know. Move on with your life. Keep going, Sean.
I'm gonna say this though. I was not in Ukraine. I think some things can be true at the same time. It doesn't change the fact that there was intervention and there was a natural rise of freedom. Lech Walesa led a charge in Poland that was much more Poland driven than it was US driven, I would argue. It had US support, but it definitely had more of a foundation of freedom. So I could understand possibly Mr. J was part of that freedom movement or something. And, maybe that's what it is.
Well, no one is saying that there weren't people on the ground who believed the things that they were protesting and saying and doing. I mean, I think we've said that 4 times now. It's just a matter of like how much more do those efforts go? How many more people are going to be persuaded by things when you throw in propaganda, when you throw in snipers shooting into crowds, and then there's the. I mean, I know, Sean, you can't go over everything, but like, you remember the part where you have lefties there talking about how they were like, sort of like having to overlook the extremism of these Nazis and far right people that were part of this thing, because they were like, well, yeah, they had some extreme views, but like, we wouldn't have been able to do all these different things we did without them, because they were more organized than us. They knew how to start the fires in the cans and how to occupy the government buildings and this and that.
Mr. J, keep talking. If I wanted any lip from you, I'd peel it off my zipper. How about that, buddy? Losing Crimea. Oops. Far from getting away from the coup cleanly, the reaction came right away. On February 22nd, 2014, Reuters reported that the U.S. had warned Russia not to invade in the aftermath of the coup after fistfights had broken out in Crimea and some eastern cities between what they called supporters of the new pro-EU order in Kyiv and those anxious to stay close to Moscow. Obama's national security advisor, Susan Rice, went on TV to try to talk them out of it. The administration had won the first round. Now they're trying to call a timeout. Crimean history. Russian under the Catherine the Great won the Crimean Peninsula from the Turks back in 1783. The same year that Benjamin Franklin, John Jay, and John Adams negotiated America's peace with Great Britain after the Revolutionary War. 4 years before our Constitution had even been written. It is part of Russia, like Virginia is a part of the United States. Think about how important the West Point is to the New Yorkers or the Alamo is to Texans. The Russians lost more than 200,000 soldiers fighting to keep Crimea out of the hands of the Brits. French and Ottomans in the Crimean War of the 1850s in an attempt to kick them out of their Sevastopol base. Crimea lost another 100,000 to the Germans and Romanians in World War II, a sacrifice which many have helped to save the USSR from being conquered by the Third Reich. The peninsula hosts Russia's Black Sea Fleet at their only year-round warm water port, cesspool, granting the direct access to the Mediterranean. You can see why they consider it an important, let them let some foreign power try to take San Diego away from the USA and see what happens. I mean, I don't know what else to tell you folks, man. Like, this goes back so long that even the United States doesn't know how to deal with it, except to intervene and interject their will with NATO into properties that belong to another country. They're not wrong. Like, if somebody tries to take Florida or take California or whatever it may be, what do you think is going to happen? The same thing that happened in Crimea. But I digress. We're going to end here, though, and I got to hang on here. Little Green Men. Though Putin later said that he had decided to seize Crimea on the night of the coup in Kiev, it was not until after former president's threat to kick Russians out of the Sevastopol that he removed to take control of the peninsula. On February 27th, armed men seized the parliament and oversaw the supposed election of a new prime minister and passage of a resolution declaring a referendum on autonomy, which was later charged to a vote rejoining the Russian Federation. The next day, Putin ordered his men to leave their bases and take control of the peninsula in a single successful coup de main. And then I'm going to read the last little bit of this. Putin explained that NATO remains a military alliance, and we are against having a military alliance making itself at home right in our backyard or in our historic territory. He joked, I simply cannot imagine that we would travel to Sevastopol to visit NATO sailors. Of course, most of them are wonderful guys, but it would be better to have them come and visit us, be our guests, rather than the other way around. For their part, the Obama administration and the other Western leaders focus on their efforts of castigating Russia, demanding their withdrawal and threatening consequences if they did not, rather than engaging in any good faith diplomacy to dial down tensions. Hey, I mean, who's wrong? It's not Russia.
Let's push.
It's definitely not Russia.
Keep pushing.
You know, it's definitely not Russia. They're not wrong in this matter. I've said this time and time again during the series that they have a legit beef through all of this. They had the right to take Georgia. They had the right to take Crimea because there's historical things that go behind it. They're not going to let NATO just take whoever. And that, I digress after that. I'm done. Mr. J, keep going, dude. No one cares.
Well, it's just that there's responses to him, but let's ignore him for now. We can address more at the end if we have time. But Mark, you go ahead and close us out here with your section.
All right. So basically what happens, the West, right, starts shooting at the East. The Azov battalion basically starts plinking at their own people in the East, right? So Russia's, the people, they're like, where's our protection, right? So I'm so happy that I get the Azov battalion because I am the grandson of a German soldier in 1940s. So I am by blood somewhere in there. There's some Nazi ideology up in there, I guess. After my grandfather served, it became East Germany. They escaped East Germany in 1953 when it was communist. So my grandfather served or lived under Hitler, Stalin, and then Eisenhower, I think, like in his life. Like, I don't know many people who can say they served under all or lived under all three of those reigns, but that's a pretty interesting thing. So what's interesting is Azov Battalion, it is a Nazi regiment, ladies and gentlemen. It is nothing but Nazis. The Galician Nazis, basically the Germans were Aryan. They were white. And they treated the Ukrainians, they were like an off-white. They were like an eggshell. No offense. That's how the Germans viewed them. The Germans, they were like dirty Aryans. They weren't exactly pure Aryans, but what they lacked in purity, they made up for with their desire to destroy and kill everything. They are just they were just really good at being evil. That's why they were kept around by the Germans. The Nazis loved them for that. So I'm going to play a couple things. So here's an interesting thing. I'm going to go through this. I hope I did it right, but I'm going to play some things. So this is what I'm trying to tie it all into. I'm going to do a little differently in my portion because we've all read it, but we're trying to tie that we support evil on every level. And then it attacks us. And then we wonder why. And we don't question that it's evil just doing evil. We think that we can control the evil, corral it. Look at Syria, look at the Middle East, look at all these things we did. So here's the first perfect example of us, of how whether we support, I don't know, these types of evil people. Let me do this.
Defense-sponsored Warrior Games features liberal comedian Jon Stewart awarding a member of Ukraine's neo-Nazi Azov battalion at Disney World. The Gray Zone reports that multiple Ukrainian Nazis were invited to the happiest place on earth by the Pentagon. But don't worry, his black sun tattoo was covered up when he received the award. According to Wikipedia, the black sun symbol is widely used by neo-fascists, neo-Nazis, the far right, and white nationalists.
How interesting. I thought it wasn't it as disinformation to say that we were funding Nazi fighters in the Ukraine, but not only are they using or being protected by weapons and things we've made available for Ukraine, we're actually just giving them medals now, invitations to Disney World.
All right.
Yeah, we forgot about the medal. You know, pour one out for the disgraced Trudeau. Just resigned.
Yes. Well, I'm getting to that one. I've got video of that one too. Let's not kid ourselves. Okay. Once again, guys, did you just see this? We invited Nazis to Disneyland or Disney World to participate in games in the happiest place on earth, and then gave them medals for it. And this is like a Jon Stewart. Now, he might not have known. I will criticize him because he didn't research, but he didn't know. But considering he's a political commentary guy, probably should have known a little bit. Maybe just a little bit. Maybe. Just call crazy. Now, to your point, Jacob. Thank you, Mr. Trudeau. I am going to play this next clip, and I'm going to speak over it because it is in Russian. It's going to be Mr. Putin himself speaking about it. And I'll read over it in the English subtitles. There are subtitles, but just in case the audio portion, right? People are going to listen. So I'm going to share this one. This is a fun one as well. All right. It starts with the fact that everyone applauded this Nazi in parliament is absolutely disgusting. Especially the president of Ukraine, who has Jewish blood in his veins, who has Jewish roots, stands there and applauds a Nazi. Not just to some belated follower of Nazi ideology, but to a person who killed Jewish people with his own hands. It was him who personally killed Jews. If the Canadian Parliament Speaker says the Canadian Ukrainian or the Ukrainian Canadian Nazi fought against Russians during World War II, he cannot but understand that he fought on Hitler's side, not on the side of his motherland, Canada. Once again,
wild.
That's from Putin. Now, Putin's telling you, you saw the applause, you saw the junta. Sean mentioned it, you mentioned as well, Jacob. Here's Trudeau applauding this guy. And it's like, he fought against the Russians, sure. He fought for the Nazis. He fought for the Nazis. Think.
But think about it. This is perfect because, as we've learned, we don't actually have we don't care about Al Qaeda or the Mujahideen or any Islamic terrorism when they're fighting against Russia. Just like we don't care about Nazis, but we care about Nazis up until the point when they're fighting against Russia.
We actually fund them. If they're fighting Russia, we fund them. We give them money See Osama bin Laden. He was an ally. We gave him all kinds of money and weapons to fight the
I'm
Russians
thinking
in the
about
80s.
I'm thinking about signing up. I'm going to go to Ukraine and become, one of the Nazis in the military. I might get a free trip to Disneyland out of it.
Seriously, I'm thinking about starting an NGO. That's where the money is, I think.
No, but can I chime in?
Oh, yeah,
Chime in real quick? You know, there's nothing new under the sun when it comes to like the United States supporting Nazis. It goes way back, actually. Look up Operation Paperclip. Look that up. Operation Paperclip was when the United States brought home Nazis to work for for NASA. My mouth gets crazy sometimes. Sorry, Libertarian Christian Institute, my bad. But no, this is totally the United States like MO. They love it. They love supporting Nazis. They love bringing them here to America. So this is pretty much a perfect scenario for them to be supporting the Azov Battalion in Ukraine. It's perfect.
Yeah. So now I'm going to share you two clips because I also I've been so lucky. You guys let me introduce Michael McFall. You let me introduce, the Azov Battalion in this way. And now I get to introduce Kathy Young, everybody. Ooh. Kathy Young at PorkFest. Okay. Let me play a little Kathy, a little Scott, and then I'll play some more Kathy, but we'll go in between. All right.
By the way, I made this for you, Sean. We're not rated PG-13.
I'm sorry. No, I apologize.
It's all good, man.
Good. I've been very good this whole time until today. I'm sorry.
Did you guys catch that?
You were listen, Sean. You were provoked. Okay.
Yes.
That's great. All right. Let me play this one more time because just a real quick thing. Notice how she already gets you to agree somehow. This is the manufacturing consent, guys. This is how they get you. Just listen to her words.
And I think everyone will agree that whatever the history between Russia and Ukraine, that was an unprovoked attack.
Whatever you think between the history of Ukraine and Russia, which is thousands of years, right? Or whatever, hundreds of years at minimum. It was clearly an unprovoked attack. We can all agree. Right? Okay. Now let's hear Scott's version because this is truth.
We're in agreement that this war is an aggressive and illegal war launched by Russia into Ukraine. I don't think there's any question about that. I don't know of anyone who disagrees with that. But it was not unprovoked.
But it was not unprovoked. We all are in agreement that what is happening is awful, atrocious, but it's not unprovoked. So I'd love for you to jump in. Then I got 2 more clips before I call my shots, and then we're good to go.
Ooh, man. I'm just going to listen. Libertarian Christian Institute, I'm going to throw some scripture in here. Proverbs 16:2. All of a person's ways seem pure to them, but motives are weighed by the Lord. And I think we can just see here that the U.S. interventions, they're not motivated by a love for democracy. They're not motivated by a love for liberty. They're not motivated by even concern for the Ukrainian people because they don't care about how many, American lives, Ukrainian lives, Russian lives, Palestinian lives. We don't care how many lives get thrown into the fire of the war machine. As long as Western influence and U.S. interests are protected, that is what matters. Now, of course, they can dress them up and make it seem good to them, but we can see through it when we actually take the time to look into this stuff and to educate ourselves and not just, not just guzzle down the propaganda like good slaves.
Well, I mean,
all right, Sean, you want to jump in before I play these last 2 clips?
Well, it's just one of those things where like you're seeing it in real time how things have been going. And the fact that the media has propagandized this to a point to make it look like, Russia's just this big bad country with their big bad leader who's just trying to take over their land isn't the case. And it's never been the case. I don't feel bad for the guy because he's a lunatic, but I feel bad for the people of Russia who got to put up with this because they don't want any of this. They really don't. You know, that's all I got, really.
All right. Oh, wait, I'm not muted. All right, cool. I agree 100%. No, none of the Russian people want this. How many hundreds of thousands of lives are gone, let alone the ones that are alive, like barely alive, missing limbs, not able to walk ever again? Like, do you want that kind of quality of life? I mean, that's what we're talking about. We just want this to stop. War is profitable. Peace is prosperous. That's what we need to know. There you go, Lindsay. We just need them minerals. Just need them trillions of dollars of minerals. All right. This is my favorite part I get to play because I hate that no one on Xverse was able to find me the timestamp. So I had to listen to Kathy Young talk for an hour again today. So I'm a little upset. I'm a little upset that I had to whenever I
Thank
look
you for your service.
Bill Crystal. Yeah, no one. I'm dragging those and getting timestamps on the transcripts or something because I cannot watch and listen to these people all the time. But the top of page 334, Scott talks about Kathy Young. He introduces her. He talks about having a debate with the author of the book, which is Scott. So this is Kathy. In her words, I found exactly the quote that she did in the debate with Scott. So I'm hoping I can share that with you guys. Let me share that.
I get into the whole, Azov Battalion thing. Which
Of course, you don't want to get into the Azov
I
Battalion.
Well, I could.
Tell me on a scale of 1 to 10 how much they love Adolf Hitler. Go.
Yeah. I mean, that would probably take us an hour, and
It's 10. They love Adolf Hitler 10 on a scale of 1 to 10. You can read it in the BBC, where they said they're here to rid the world of the Jewish-led Untermenschen and save the white race. One of the major militias is called C14. That stands for the 14 words of the slogan of the white supremacists. Give me a break.
That was written by a guy who co-founded the Azov Battalion. It is really not. I mean, the fact that there were some bad people involved with co-founding what is currently a regiment in the Ukrainian army really doesn't mean that it's a Nazi outfit today.
What do you mean? What do you mean? Oh.
Which is why, we really can't have this argument because it would really take way too much.
Please stop it.
Of, what happened with the Ukrainian
They're
army.
moderate reform Nazis. We can
to
accept that, right, guys?
Moderate reform Nazis, my favorite part. They're moderate reform Nazis.
You're losing your clip. You're losing your clip privileges because that was just painful. Oh gosh,
I know.
She acts like this was like ancient history. Like, oh yeah, 200 years ago, this regiment was founded by some Nazis, and that's just an unfortunate fact. Like, what do you mean? Like, there were active Nazis in the 2014 Maidan Revolution, and like the guy like Belitsky is still serving today. He hasn't disavowed his Nazism. By the way, for those who don't know, the 14 words is we must secure a future for white people and white children or something along those lines. I'm paraphrasing it, but that's the phrase. And yeah, like that's like these people aren't like what is a reform Nazi, by the way? Like moderate Nazi. Come on.
Yeah, I love that.
I'm just that's like saying like, oh, I'm a reformed pedophile. Like
yes.
Listen, Sean.
I was gonna say it's like, oh sure, Epstein owned an island, and sure he did get a little bit for racketeering and trafficking, sure, in the past, but maybe he's changed.
Oh God, these people, do they actually believe the sewage coming out of their mouths? Okay, it's sewage. I'm going to say not even garbage, because sometimes garbage
Can't read
can
that,
be
Sean.
recycled.
Can you read that to us? Sorry.
That's the Azov Battalion waving flags right there. Ukrainian flags with all kinds of Nazi stuff on there. Give me a break.
All right, go ahead, Jacob. Sorry about that. Sorry, I cut you off there.
No, we're good.
I do have one more clip. I just have one more clip before I call it. Once again, everybody it's been awesome interaction. We want people to interact. We want dissenting voices. I understand that people think that things happen, but I've gotten more information. The more information you get, the better answer you get. That's how an equation works. It gets more accurate, more detailed. Context changes the content, right? So let me play this last piece. It's just a little one, and then we'll just close it for the day. Let me do this. This is one of my favorites, just because the way, just listen to how she just tries to minimize what it is. It's just beautiful.
Of the fighting forces involved with a regiment that has a dubious history with a white supremacist founder is unfortunate, but I don't think that should really materially influence the course of our support for Ukraine.
What?
Of course you don't.
Well, a portion of maybe one. Some of them hate all the Jews. Some of them hate all the Jews, and was one to Uber mentioned. But that shouldn't take away our support. Oh, how'd that work for? Let's see, Al Qaeda. How'd that work for ISIS? How'd that work in Afghanistan? How'd that work in Iraq? How'd that work in Syria? Look at Syria right now. Oh, right now we're presenting medals to guys we have $10 million bounties on years ago. So, lastly, I do have one last piece. There was a bill in 2018 introduced by Congress. Let me read the bill because it's so funny how absolutely they don't give a shit. I'm sorry that I said that. It's the first time I cursed, I think, all day. So this is how clearly they do not care. Now, I will say this. Massey, Rand Paul, and Mike Lee all voted no. Now, I have them out. I have a tweet out to them asking them why. I think it's because it was part of an omnibus and they were just against the omnibus as a whole. So I'm going to guess that because this section alone was only one piece of 132 pieces in this one section in this big bill. So you can imagine how hard it is to dissect. But this is how clearly we are against the Azov Battalion. Are you ready? This is how clearly it's written. Section 8129 of HR Bill 1625 in 2018, March 23rd. Prohibits funds provided by this division from being used to provide arms, training, or other assistance to the Azov Battalion. That's all it says. That's literally all it says. There's no way to implement it. There's no way to like regulate it. No, we will not give arms to Azov Battalion. Okay, that's what we voted on, and it did pass. And you saw how much they're not getting support, right? I'll leave it at that.
Oh my gosh. Well, listen, let me say something here, just my closing thoughts, and then you guys can give your closing thoughts before we hop out. I have so much scripture I want to bring up here. I'll bring up just a couple more. Proverbs 3:29-30 says, "Do not plot harm against your neighbor who lives trustfully near you. Do not accuse anyone for no reason." So, we expanded NATO up to Russia's borders, and the entire time assumed the worst with them. And the Romans 12 says, "Pursue peace as far as it depends on you." Okay, well, did we do anything to pursue peace? Did our leaders do anything to try to avert conflict? No, in fact, kind of the opposite happened, I would say. And listen, this is not to say that again, Putin's invasion is not morally defensible, but it was absolutely provoked. And as Christians and as libertarians, we have to recognize the role of Western provocation for creating the circumstances where this conflict was possible, because this conflict wasn't inevitable. It's like, even though what Putin did is wrong, it was not in a vacuum, and it could have easily been avoided if a policy of openness and of friendship had been pursued, like Gorbachev wanted, like even Putin wanted at one point, right? Two wrongs don't make a right. And the fact of the matter is that both,
to be honest, I think Putin would still want it. If he could keep his power and keep his money, what does he care? If he stays in power, I don't think he cares how. Well, I think he actually thought, the Western way was the easiest, and we didn't let him because we still needed an enemy just in case China didn't pan out.
It's a Monroe Doctrine. it doesn't mean, listen, America would do the same thing as a Christian. I think we would all agree as anti-war libertarians. That's not the way we think that ethics work. That's not something we would justify. But that is it. Now, if I was just evaluating Putin on the norms of the sort of like 21st century post Cold War nation state ethics that America operates on, then I would say Putin's actually showed a lot of restraint compared to what the American government and military would do in similar circumstances. But the point is that, again, two wrongs don't make a right. The U.S. and Russia have pursued policies that have prioritized power over people, but America is in a much greater place of power and is interfering in things that have nothing to do with them. America is not affected by what goes on in Ukraine. America's not affected by what goes on in Poland or in Germany or in it has no bearing on us. And the only interests being served here are the interests of those who want more money and want more power. But what they don't want is more peace. One last scripture I'll share. This is from Luke 14, and Jesus says, "Suppose one of you wants to build a tower. Won't you first sit down and estimate the cost to see if you have enough money to complete it? For if you lay the foundation and are not able to finish it, everyone who sees you will ridicule you, saying, 'This person began to build but wasn't able to finish.' Or suppose a king is about to go to war against another king. Won't he first sit down and consider whether he is able with 10,000 men to oppose the one coming against him with 20,000? If he is not able, then he will send a delegation while the other is still a long way off and will ask for terms of peace." In the same way, he goes on to say that, basically he ends on this, like, salt is good, but if it loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It is neither fit for the soil nor for the manure pile. It is thrown out. Whoever has ears to hear, let him hear. And there's a lot of lessons into this. Jesus is talking about sort of the cost of following him, the cost of being a disciple. But there's also principles here about, like, being thoughtful, right? Being intentional, thinking about the long-term ramifications of any course of action. And it's saying that, like, if you're going to, set out on a course of action to do some long-term project, you need to consider the long-term costs of that. And if you're a king, if you're a government, whatever, and you're in conflict with someone else, consider the cost of human lives, of money and whatnot. And if it is possible, talk with people, right? Like, send a
What a novel
delegation out.
idea.
Try to negotiate peace. Try to avoid the conflict.
You mean don't rip up a peace treaty a month in?
Right. Yeah.
Is that what you mean by, like, talk it out?
Yeah. I mean, there's
Boris
so many
Johnson?
examples where
Yeah.
again, it's like, I don't want to paint Putin as an angel, but it's sort of like, if there's such a thing as a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Like, if you keep treating anyone, whether it's a country, a politician, or even a person, right? Like, you see this with bullies in high school, right? Like, you bully a kid till he gets older, and then he becomes a bully, right? Hurt people. And that's not even justification, but it's just like, man, like, I don't know, basic human psychology, right? Like, you keep pushing people, they eventually get to breaking points. And that's bad enough if you do that in your own private life. But if we're going to have a government, which I don't want one, but if we're going to have one,
We do have one, unfortunately.
we do have one, unfortunately, then at the very least, I'm going to demand that they pursue policies of peace. And that's not what they're doing.
Absolutely not. And that's never in the history of America. We've never been peace. Since the country's birth in 1776, there's only been a decade where the United States has, or maybe a little over a decade, maybe 12 years, something like that, where the United States has not been involved in some kind of conflict. That is a fact, and And just for me to close it out, before we go, I'm going to read a Bible verse for you guys because I love this verse with my whole heart. Ecclesiastes 1:9. What has been done will be again. I'm sorry. What has been will be again. What has been done will be done again. There is nothing new under the sun. And that's the verse.
Yeah.
History does not repeat itself. Humanity does, right?
That's right.
And,
the one thing we
it's
learn from
what happens.
history
I
is
mean,
that we don't learn
we
from
talk
history.
about the fourth turning even coming up. If you haven't read that book, was it Neil Howell? Is it? I think it's the fourth turning. That's a great book to read. So it's basically talking about the 4 cycles of the 20-year, it's an 80-year cycle, right? Or generational cycles. And it's the, what is it? Strong people create easy times create weak men create bad times.
Hard times. Yep.
Bad time. We're on that crust of the bad, the crux of the bad times, creating a new blend of strong young men that are starting to kind of retake that a little bit. So we're starting to see that, and it's really interesting. It's called The Fourth Turning. Another book I also recommend that does show, because people, this is the thing with geopolitics, is people do work from scarcity, these countries. Peter Zeihan wrote a book called The End of the World is Just the Beginning. And basically he's talking about the geopolitics of how Europe is doing this and Germany's doing, or how the United States is doing this. And what's funny to me is I'm watching Europe single-handedly cut its own face off, cut its own legs off, cut its own arms off, and absolutely let the United States steer its Titanic ship directly into the iceberg that is Russia. I do not understand why Europe would have anything to do with us in this way and not join with Russia. Why wouldn't you talk to your neighbor? Why would you're your neighbor? It's like crazy. All right, I'll let it go. Thank you everyone for joining. This is so awesome. We got week 5 coming. We're halfway through, guys. Halfway through. I'm so excited.
Yeah, a lot of fun. Finally the halfway mark. We got some more guests coming up. I think in 2 weeks we have Dave DeCamp coming on. That's going to be a lot of fun. Try to get a couple more guests in here as well before we close out. And you guys want to plug your anything else you got coming up before we hop off? Sean, anything you want to plug?
Nothing really coming up, man. I do my show live every Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern. I have a good time with it. A lot of people seem to have some fun. The chat's always rowdy. As being the radical anarchist, I have a radical anarchist following, and they're great folks. But it's not about me. It's about getting a message out. So if you want to hear a message, my show's good for you.
Awesome.
And I'm Not Conscious. Thursdays, 7 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Arizona time. Right now, it's Jason to drop the mask. We got Sean, Zach, and Andrew are coming on, I think, this week if we're trying to get everybody together in this little panel. Mondays with you guys. Tonight, I'm going on a weird UFO Chronicles podcast. Ooh, I had a near-death experience. I get to share that. I did share it a little bit with Jason on his, but I get to do that. But I've got Per Beelan just agreed to. I just scheduled him for next week, I think. So I had Econ Bro, you have Econ Bro. We're starting to grain messages. The message is growing. We're starting to collaborate. I think we're finding our own group here, and we're starting to grow within that. And our Venn diagrams are starting to overlap, and we're starting to get a bigger community of people who are liberty-minded as a whole. Because once again, the three of us have very different perspectives on, for even spirituality, even between the two of you probably have different opinions about it.
Yeah, no, it's been a lot of fun getting to know you guys more, and we all bring a little bit different approach to the table, but it and it all comes together. It's a spontaneous order. This whole thing was with our principles in action, right? Like we literally organized this in a week, put it together, and it's turned out great so far, and I'm excited for the second half. Everybody, just in terms of what I got coming up tomorrow, I'm going to be joined by the one and only Spike Cohen of You Are the Power, former vice presidential candidate who recently came to faith in Jesus Christ. So that's going to be a very fun conversation. We're going to talk politics and religion, and of course the intersection between those things as well. And then what else do I got coming up? The regular podcast, because I took a break for the holidays, will be starting back up Wednesday, and then again on the 22nd, and then back to weekly after that. So you guys can find out more about that at biblicalanarchypodcast.com. That's all we have for you guys tonight. Make sure you like this video wherever you're watching it before you hop off. Make sure you give this a thumbs up. Make sure you're subscribed wherever you're watching so you get notifications and know when we're coming back. And yeah, look forward to talking with you guys again next week. See you then.